Lydia O'Donnell proudly says that she runs like a girl. The marathon runner is an advocate for a more female-centred approach to coaching women in running. As Nike Pacific head running coach, she creates running programs for male and female athletes. She says understanding the physiology of a woman's body can be used to enhance a runner's progress, and that the menstrual cycle, rather than being the burden it's usually thought of, can actually be used to a woman athlete's advantage. Lydia has founded FEMI, a team of female running coaches who create specialised running plans for women. She's also collaborated with Nike to create a training program on the Nike Run Club app, especially for women. Still a top athlete herself, she's faced the disruption of COVID to international schedules and memorably completed a half marathon fully masked in an MIQ car park. She's competing for the forthcoming Melbourne Marathon. Originally from Tauranga, Lydia is with us from her base in Melbourne, where it's nice and early. But you've had a run already, of course, Lydia. Good morning.
Kia ora, Catherine. How are you?
A morning runner. Good to see. Look, obviously, it's really difficult times for the city at the moment. Lockdowns, life very much on hold. For you as an athlete, I think that marathon's already been bumped back, postponed once. How are you managing your running in this environment?
Yeah, it has been a pretty tough time ever since COVID hit the start of 2020. We have had plenty of races postponed, and it's been frustrating at times. But I think, running, although I love competing and I love running fast, I think running is a gift and a blessing that we're able to just get outside and, breathe some fresh air and go for a run each day. So although I can't race, I'm still very grateful I can still run.
It's a large part of your story. It's the large part of many athletes' story. Managing your physical training is one thing, managing the mental stresses of being an athlete and some of the personality traits too. That high competitiveness is a big part of the story as well. For you, is that ability to exercise and to run a pivotal part of managing the mental stresses of this pandemic?
Yeah, definitely. Running is definitely one of the outlets for me to look after my mental health. And so, like I said, the fact that I can't race, it definitely has been hard. Running as a competitive athlete is part of my identity, but I try not to make it my entire identity. And it's important to just step away sometimes and, get what we could get from running is, the breathing the fresh air, connecting with other people, being able to get outside and get some adrenaline going. I think those benefits for our mental health are really important. So trying to focus on those has definitely got me through this year.
And some endorphins are handy as well. I can't help but revisit, I know it was about a year ago now, the half marathon in the MIQ car park. I think it was last October. I do think it may be pipped by the person who did it on his balcony in Italy quite early in the pandemic. That was done fully masked, and that was it just goes to show, doesn't it? When you're a committed athlete, you have to find ways and means. That must have been a particularly unusual means of running the half marathon distance.
Yeah, I think although that was a good challenge for me, people are doing some pretty amazing things around the world at the moment, especially when COVID first hit. Yeah, people running inside of their apartments or on their balconies, crazy. But it was good to just be able to do something in MIQ. I think running got me through that for sure. And the car park, I think, was about 110 metres. So I think by the time I'd finished, I think I'd run over maybe 1,500 laps of that car park over the 2 weeks. So definitely got sick of it, but it kept me going, definitely.
Gosh, the masks, I admire the runners I see still managing to mask up as well. Some can. I think the bandana version sometimes looks to be the most successful because you can let a bit of expiration out the bottom of it. But yeah, another particular channel. Can we talk a little bit about your career before we get into this latest focus? And we've sort of alluded to it. You were a young athlete and I think this is important for women athletes to hear, actually, and young women athletes to hear, because it's a real issue. This question of training and overtraining that's now caused you to look specifically at how women should train. This was lived experience for you as a young athlete, yeah?
Yeah, absolutely. When I was growing up as a young girl, as a teenager, I was being coached by an incredible female coach at the time who really focused on just making running and enjoying running my priority. And it wasn't about the times or the medals or how fast I was running. She really held me back. And that's, I guess, where my love for running was born. And then as I got older, especially through my early 20s, I think I put a lot of pressure on myself to perform at the level I wanted to. But by getting there was by training probably too hard at the time and doing things like restricting my diet to look a certain way, the way that I thought I had to look to be at the level of an athlete that I was wanting to be. So I think I faced a lot of pressures internally as well as externally that probably led me down the wrong path and actually led me to falling into a state of RED-S, which is called relative energy deficiency syndrome, which is all about when your body is under a state of extreme stress, your internal organs and things start to shut down because you are not fueling yourself properly to be able to export or put out the energy that you're trying to do in training, as well as life stresses as well. So I fell into RED-S, and I think that had a massive impact on where I am now, because I learned a lot about hormone health and how I needed to probably get rid of those external pressures that I was feeling and just do what was right for me and my body to be the athlete that I wanted to be.
It's really interesting. It seems to have been a couple of sort of crunch points in your career on this front. One was as a very young athlete, sort of high school age when you got the scholarship to Texas, and then also as an adult athlete and with a business career that was taking off as well. You've had a long association with Nike, and that included a very sort of top high pressure job. So there were a couple of times in life where you had that wake up call from your body and from your brain that you were pushing things too far.
Yeah, I did, and I completely ignored them for a long time. I think I was trying to be superwoman, which many females do. We have, a lot of things going on in our lives, and I really wanted to be able to do everything and do everything at 110%. So I had so many stresses going on, and my body was telling me signs that I needed to slow down. Things were happening, like I lost my menstrual cycle for 9 months at that point. My hair was falling out. I had so many signs that were telling me my body was telling me I needed to take things easier or slow things down, and I completely ignored them for a long time until I guess I got to a point where I couldn't ignore them anymore. My performance as an athlete was definitely suffering. I could barely go out and run at all, which was, for me, as someone who loves running, I was pretty disheartened by that. So it was then when I looked in the mirror one day and just realized I needed to make some changes. And I ended up quitting my job at the time. That was a really high pressure job, and just really focused on my own health, and both physical and my mental health.
And got into your coaching. That question of amenorrhea, of periods disappearing for a period of months, pardon the pun, for quite some months at time, this still happens with young women athletes, and it needs good advice. There can be disruptions to the menstrual cycle for many reasons. Everybody's different, but definitely it is at least a warning sign to get things checked out. And yet we still know there are young athletes experiencing it. Yeah.
Absolutely, and I grew up in a world where losing your period was almost seen as a sign of that you were training hard enough and that you were performing well enough. It was almost like if you lost your period, you were doing really well, and we didn't realise at the time how detrimental that could be to our performance, but also our overall health. So amenorrhea is something that's still happening absolutely to so many young girls, and we're just trying to educate girls on how having a healthy menstrual cycle and having your period and having healthy hormones can actually be really beneficial to us as athletes.
This is the thing. It's not a question of, it's a sacrifice you make to train as hard as you need to train. It is actually evidence that maybe women and girls were training the wrong way. So let's get to the point where you start looking into the different physiologies. For a start, I'm sure a lot of the research and a lot of the training programs that have progressed over the years have probably been trialled or have gathered most of their data from male athletes. That tends to be a bias in any number of things, any number of research.
Yeah.
How did you go about actually saying what is the optimal training to get maximal results out of women athletes, and does it look different from the way we're training?
Yeah, correct. I think back in the day, less than 10% of sports science research studies were actually done on females because of the menstrual cycle. It created outliers in these studies. So what sports scientists ended up doing was just removing the females from the studies and doing the studies on men, and then just applying what they learned from men to females, not understanding that we have completely different physiologies. So it was really only until I got sick and went through Red S myself that I started diving into a lot more of the research and understanding and becoming educated myself on healthy hormones for females. And I guess what kickstarted my journey was reading Dr. Stacey Sims' book, Roar, which is spelled ROAR, and her incredible studies really taught me a lot about my body and everything, I guess, that I was doing wrong and how I could change that to perform better as an athlete, but also just feel better in myself as a female. So going through her book, and then ended up doing a lot of Dr. Stacey Sims' online courses and reading a lot more of the research and understanding it, has definitely led me to a point of frustration because so many other females don't know this information. But I guess that's why we created Femi and started educating other females and female athletes on how they can work better with their bodies.
Dr. Stacey Sims, a former guest on 9 to Noon, and anyone interested in more on this can find that link on our website and go back and listen to the work that she's done, the scientific research that she's done. I do want to talk a little bit, though, about your recovery out of this before we crack into exactly how you coach your athletes now, because you had chronic fatigue on top of everything else, and that's the physiological, but you also had the psychological recovery to happen. And could you explain a little bit more about how you, I guess, healed yourself, how long it took, and what some of the the one step forward, two step back situations were?
Yeah. Wow. It's interesting now that I know all this information. Chronic fatigue, which I thought that was all I was suffering at the time. I think the fatigue was just one of the symptoms that I was facing by going through relative energy deficiency syndrome. So the fatigue was really bad, but it was also alongside, losing my menstrual cycle as well. So it was about 6 months to a year, I would say, that I was actually suffering and had symptoms that I completely ignored. But once I actually put in an intervention, I guess, with myself and made some changes, it was about 3 months I spent where I really just, I slept a lot. I really didn't train much at all, and started fueling my body properly, because I went through a period of time where I fell into fad diets as well, which was pressure from, the media and social media, especially, where I cut carbohydrates out of my diet for an entire 6 months, which now I think about that is crazy. But after fueling myself properly for about 3 months, I felt better. I didn't feel like myself. It probably was about 18 months, 2 to 2 years, till I actually started feeling better and performing a lot better as well on the track. So it did take a long time, and I had to be patient with myself. But I think my driving force was the fact that I wanted to feel good while I was running, and I knew how much I loved running. So that was my motivation to get better. You
had your own business, as we said, you started your own business when you took this time out coaching athletes, male and female athletes. Then you go to Australia in 2019 and continue to work for Nike, and you've got this role focused on coaching, now head run coach for Pacific, which again sounds like a big job, right? But let's delve into how to design a running program that takes into account the female physiology. There's lots of things that will be taken into account into individually designing a program, most importantly where someone is at and where they're capable of getting to. But what are some of the specific things that you do differently when designing a program for a woman athlete now than a man?
Yeah, so we launched Femi, which is our female-focused running coaching company, about a year ago. And Femi is all about working with females on a one-to-one basis and making all of the training super personalised to her, to make sure that we're taking into account all of those hormonal fluctuations that happen throughout the month or throughout a menstrual cycle. So through the menstrual cycle, obviously our hormones are changing depending on where you're at in your cycle and if you have a natural cycle or not. But the first 2 weeks, generally speaking, textbook speaking, I guess, with a 28-day cycle, days 1, which is the first day of your period, all the way through to day 14 is what we call our follicular phase, or our low hormone phase. First you go through menstruation, then you go into a follicular phase, and then into ovulation. So it's kind of broken into 3 stages. But this is our optimum time to be training quite hard, which kind of goes against everything we were brought up thinking. When you were on your period, you had to take it easy and do yoga and eat ice cream and sit on the couch. But we at FEMI really believe, like, if you don't have too many symptoms from your menstruation period, then you can train actually quite hard because your hormones are so low. We're actually able to reach high intensities a lot easier, and we're able to access our fuel stores a lot easier as well. So through that period, we try and push our athletes to do more speed-focused work, so short, fast reps where we're actually pushing the heart rate pretty high. And then in the back end of our cycle, which we call our luteal phase, when our hormones are rising, this is when we really want to focus more on like endurance work or form and try and take out the intensity. We know through that period we need to make sure we're focusing more on rest and recovery to get the most out of the female. So yeah, we're pulling back the intensities and allowing her to go maybe a little bit longer in training, but just not pushing the heart rate so high.
It's interesting during the first stage whether it might relieve, perhaps, have people said it's actually relieved some of their physiological experiences of menstruation, because exercise perhaps can help. Like, what have you heard about people adapting from, this is the do nothing, to actually this is when I train quite hard?
Yeah, definitely. I think there's been so many negative connotations around having a period as a female. You know, it's always been, it's a nuisance if you've got your period and it's annoying and it's not great and, you know, you're going to not feel good. But I think as soon as you change that mindset and you flip the narrative to making the female feel really empowered that they have a period and that you can actually feel really good by having a period, yes, females do feel a lot more in control of their body and their bodies. And like, I now get excited when I'm going to get my period because I know that I can train a little bit harder. So I think it's a massive mindset thing as well. But yeah, I think personally, exercise is great for females to be able to balance our hormones as well. So if you get the balance right, then yes, females can feel better in their bodies at all phases throughout the menstrual cycle.
And that luteal phase, that sort of build up to the next menstrual cycle, the next period, is again often when, you know, there's plenty of myths abounding, but there are mood issues or feeling a bit down or whatever. What you were saying is actually this is a challenging time physiologically for the body, and this is a time to ease up a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah, you can definitely face some mental, like a lot of females face some mental health issues or struggles through that luteal phase. So we know that, and we know that we're not going to push our females to train really hard through that period, because it's not great for their physiology and not able to reach those intensities anyway. But also, we don't want to put a session into a female's program that they're going to really struggle to do and really struggle to reach the paces that we're asking them to work at, and then they're going to walk away defeated. We'd rather give them a session we know they're going to feel really good doing and walk away feeling really confident about themselves as well. I think, you know, at FEMI, yes, we are running coaches and that's what we're there to do, make the females better runners, but we also want to empower females to just feel better within themselves and grow their confidence. So that's another reason why we want to adapt training to the hormones, to make sure females feel really confident in their bodies.
What you're doing effectively is adapting the timing of training. Overall, is it a similar training program to what went before, but just adapted to particular times over the course of a month?
Yes, it is similar. A lot of females who have never trained to their menstrual cycle before will just do quite high intensity work all the time, and thinking, you know, there's that mindset of just doing more is better or harder is better, but it's not necessarily true. I think if we can actually adapt our training to our menstrual cycles, we're going to benefit more from our training. And recovery is such a massive part of training, no matter what level athlete you're at. It's important to put recovery in. So if we can actually put the recovery in when our bodies need it, and then push our bodies harder when our bodies can get there, you're actually going to progress better as an athlete anyway. Recovery
is when the adaptation happens. It's so misunderstood sometimes, isn't it? It's in that recovery phrase that the physical adaptation actually happens. You're not a huge fan of the prominence on high intensity interval training or HIIT training. There's been some studies that show it can be beneficial to some of the key measures, but is the problem that research looks at it being done once a week not once or twice a day? And are you seeing
Correct.
people who are just totally overdoing this? And just remind people what it is. It's taking your heart rate beyond its maximum, actually, beyond what its maximum rate should be. Most training happens at, maybe 70, 80%, and then getting up to 90% is a high level of maximum heart rate, is a pretty intense training session. To go beyond the maximum, you're really pushing things hard. And are people just doing too much of it?
They are. High intensity training has just become such a craze over the last, I'd probably say about 5 to 10 years now. Like, people just love that high intensity training. A, because you can get a workout in 20 to 30 minutes. And B, it is an incredible feeling when you walk away from a session where you have left everything out on the table. So I understand why people, especially females, love it. But it can be really detrimental to our hormone health, especially. So high intensity training should be done. And when you look at a running program, it's the perfect way to execute it. We only do that sort of training once or twice a week. And so whether you're a runner or if you're someone even just going into the gym, it's important to understand that doing high intensity training is not every day is not good for you. It can severely affect your hormones. It can severely affect your cortisol levels. And if you're not putting enough recovery into your training programs, you're actually going to end up going backwards, which is really unfortunate and I think really misunderstood by so many people. So, we try to educate females on the right way to do high intensity training, and I'm not trying to say don't do it at all, but if you are a runner, do it when you're in your running sessions, and if you're not, then if you're going into the gym, just do it once or twice a week.
Some doing it, you say, simply to change the physique rather than the overall health and fitness benefits. And I want to just finish with some of that messaging which clearly affected you as a young athlete, whether it was coming from the global, sort of coaching fraternity and this is how it's done, or whether it was coming through social media. It clearly impacted a lot on you. Do you still see some very dangerous messaging out there targeting young women, young men as well, actually, to be honest, but particularly targeting young women, where it is all about body shape and looking like this, and not the body shape being the consequence of the health and fitness?
Yeah, absolutely. I think social media is playing into that so much, and it really concerns me for the next generation of, both males and females, the pressures that they are feeling that they need to look a certain way to be worthy, which is definitely what I felt. I grew up, thinking that my body wasn't built for to be an athlete, or I wanted to look a certain way. And so I was restricting my diet and overtraining and doing everything wrong purely because of what I looked like, which is completely wrong. So at Femi, we really want to just focus on how females feel. And if any athlete comes to me and wants to run to lose weight, I just immediately talk them through the process of why we want to focus on feel versus what we look like, because there is so many pressures from media, social media, even just the world around us to look a certain way. And I think the health and wellness industry is definitely playing on that and has played on it so bad in the past that we need to what we want to do at Femi is change and undo all the bad that the industry has put out in the last few years to try and show that exercise and movement is a gift, and we really should embrace it for what it can do to our mental health and how it can make us feel versus what it can do to our aesthetics and what we look like.
Lydia, of course, the questions always come at the last minute. I've got 3. If you could address them as succinctly as possible. Could you please ask your guests about training if you're on the pill? That tends to regularise menstrual periods as much as anything, doesn't it, Lydia? Have you had any particular issues relating to that?
Yeah, when you're on an OCP, the oral contraceptive pill, you are pumping your body with synthetic hormones. So it does make it hard to be able to train to your cycle because you aren't getting those hormonal fluctuations like you would if you had a normal natural cycle. So yeah, it does make it hard. You can't really get the benefits out of cycle syncing like you would if you had a natural cycle, unfortunately.
Now, here's another one to do with contraception. What about females training when they are on a contraception that interrupts their menstrual cycle? For example, the Mirena coil, where you get almost no period. This is the same answer, really, is it?
Yeah, similar answer. Depending, some females still ovulate and go through ovulation and hormonal fluctuations, being on the Mirena, but does make it hard not getting a period and understanding where you're at in your cycle. I think there's definitely other ways you can test through temperature checking to see if you are ovulating, but it does make it a bit harder.
And this one, I think Dr. Stacey Sims' book addressed this. You might want to remind me about that, or I know I certainly raised it with her in the interview. This emailer asks, where are we? Any studies have been done on older women after menopause in their 60s and beyond?
Yes, Dr. Stacey Sims has actually just launched a course around peri and post-menopause and the training and the recovery and nutrition and what you should be focusing on in all three of those aspects with being post-menopause. So I would highly recommend reading her book, but also going in to do her course because she dives pretty deep into post-menopause, which is really interesting because there are quite a few changes you can make to benefit your physiology and make yourself feel better as well.
Bone strength, of course, is a big one as well. Roar, that book is ROAR by Dr. Stacey Sims. Just finally with Femi, you're about to launch a new program. What else is on the agenda for your business?
Yeah, we're really excited. We're launching an online course, hopefully by the end of this year, which will be put out to help educate people, both females and males, how to work with female athletes better. So from a physiological point of view, we have a dietitian, an endocrinologist, and a physiotherapist who will be delivering a lot of that, the physiological information. And then between my co-founder, Esther Kewen, and myself, we're going to be talking more around communication and relationships and how to really just have conversations with female athletes to make them feel confident and empowered. So we're really excited by that. We just know that there's been such a lack of education around working with females, and so we want to change that and hopefully drive more young females especially to take up our sport and be able to do it in the future.
Lydia, thanks very much. Good luck for that marathon half marathon for you in November, I think it is now, and he's hoping it goes ahead. He's hoping a lot more things start going ahead from this summer. Thanks very much. Lydia O'Donnell, a New Zealander now living in Melbourne and Nike Pacific head running coach, as well as her business Femi we've just been talking about.